So, thank you all so much for being here today with us. My name's Lauren Adams Willett. I work for Arkansas Folk and Traditional Arts, which is a department of special collections in the university libraries at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Arkansas Folk and Traditional Arts is a statewide public folklore program, and we have three mainstay programs. This web series, our apprenticeship program, and our community scholars program. You can learn more about us at the link I'm putting in the chat right now. Our apprenticeship program is currently taking applications for mentor artists to work one-on-one with an apprentice. And that's really all I'll say about that. I also want to say, I just want to mention quickly that today is Juneteenth, and although this web series is not about Juneteenth, I want to mention it. I want to say happy Juneteenth and just acknowledge that today's a day of good celebration and fellowship around our country. Our guest today is Margie Raimondo. She's the owner and founder of Urbana Farmstead in Little Rock, Arkansas. She offers classes there in canning, gardening, and more. She also has a fresh farm market on that property. She does catered dinners. She ensures that Urbana Farmstead is committed to growing, preserving, and consuming the freshest herbs and produce available while cultivating a strong sense of community through garden-based learning opportunities throughout the year. And that's from her website, urbanafarmstead.net, which I'll put in the chat shortly. So now we'll go ahead and talk. Can you just tell us a little bit what is Urbana Farmstead? What are you getting up to over there?
Okay. Well, you did a great job on communicating kind of what the description is. First of all, I want to say thank you for this opportunity, Lauren, and thank you all for the time to come and listen a little bit about my life and my farm and what I'm doing here in the community, and also acknowledge Juneteenth as well and the day of celebration for their freedom. So for the our people's freedom. So, but farm so. For when I think about if I had to like pinpoint what is Urbana Farmstead, what does it mean to me? It's almost like rekindling my roots and the way I grew up as a child. And that was really when I set out to create this environment. I wanted to go back and pay tribute and honor all of our traditions as Italians who immigrated from Italy to America. So that's really what it stands for. It represents the key components of what sort of makes up our Italian culture. So it has the farm, because fresh food is very important. Farming traditions are very important, and then also it has the market, because you got to come in and buy those traditional products that are either grown and or preserved. And then the magic really happens in my life in the kitchen. So I have the third component is I have a nice little farmhouse kitchen with a dining room. And that's when I get to really be the teacher. I get to be somebody who gets to share my recipes and traditions and customs with people when they come to my cooking classes, or if you come and enjoy a high tea on the farm. Just any experience you have in the kitchen is sort of a little bit where the magic happens, because that's, for me, food is my love language. So when I'm in that kitchen, I'm speaking to you with all my love and all my passion.
Yeah. So I know you didn't grow up in Arkansas. Actually, before I ask that question, can you just tell us, can you go over a little bit, like, what are you growing? What's happening? Like, what's the landscape? Like, what do you see when you go to work every day, I guess?
Yeah. So very unique kind of environment. I live on an urban farm, and I mean very urban. It's like in an industrial area off of Arch Street, right before Landmark. The property itself is about 1 acre, but I farm on less than a third of an acre. So when I'm looking out my window right now during this call, and I'm looking at the chicken coop, and we have 17 hens and 2 roosters and about 11 small little babies. I'm looking out the other side. I see a nice little greenhouse, little farmhouse that that we call a high tunnel, where I'm growing things all the time, like on my vegetables. And then, of course, I'm sitting in the kitchen, and on the right side behind me is my kitchen area. So it's unique because what I always tell people is, look, if you want to grow your own food and know the source of your own food, you can do that. You don't have to have 12 acres of rolling hills. You can just be like me, and you can have a backyard, a patio. You can grow food on a small space. In fact, I grow all my tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets, and I do a lot of vertical farming. So here on the property, the kinds of crops that I grow, I specialize in herbal herbs. So I have both medicinal as well as I have culinary herbs, a variety of those types of things. And then I also have, traditional specialty crop products. So I have tomatoes, obviously, but I grow tomatoes that you can eat on a sandwich, as well as mostly I grow things that you can put in a can, like jar them. And then I also have, of course, melizano or eggplant. That's very important to my culture, so I grow a lot of eggplant. I have peppers, variety of different peppers. I have some of the traditional, things that you would expect, like the serranos and the poblanos, but I also have like Hungarian peppers. I have traditional southern squash, and I have zucchini, so I have a variety of different things that you would expect to see here. So yeah, so that's what I have. I also have, the final element is my pollinator garden. I have 2 or 3 different areas devoted to pollinators. We have 5 hives, 5 beehives. And so, you got to give them some food. So I have lots of neat things that we're growing that get to feed them all year long.
Oh, it sounds so beautiful. And then I want to get just a little bit, pull out a little bit more detail. Because I'm looking as you talk, I'm looking at your page. It looks like you're doing a lot of baking. You're doing some canning. What's for sale in your what's farm market? Sorry.
In the farm market. So I have what would be considered traditional farmers market, in the sense that I have fresh produce. But what makes it a little bit different is it's more of like a farmer's market slash specialty food store. You'll probably hear, or you've heard already, that I'm Italian, and mostly I travel to Sicily a lot. So I have a lot of products that I import directly from small farmers like me and artisan producers in Sicily. So you can get very unique products there, including great olive oils and amazing Sicilian ancient grain pastas. And then I also, because of my preservation background, that I, learned how to do preservation while I was training as a chef, I have a lot of my canned things. So you can, if it's pickle, jam, jelly, those types of things, you can definitely come and get all those things. Of course, now we're going into the season, and this Saturday is actually my first canning. I have a canning club, so we're doing our first canning club activity. We're canning some things, and I'll be canning with my canning club all summer long. So if you want to learn how to preserve food, just give me a shout. And then also, in addition to that, we have, of course, the tinctures from the herbs, and I make tea blends from my herbs. So you can buy those types of things. And I have a fresh food kind of program that I do. So you can always buy, in the freezer, you can buy my homemade sausage, homemade meatballs. So my mom's from Naples, my dad's from Sicily. So my meatballs are from Sicily, the recipe from the family, and my sausages are Napolitano. But I always have those, and I have, this weekend I have lasagna in the case. Let's see, what else do I have? Custard pies. I mean, different things that I make, all very seasonal. So you can come in and get that
Stop
stuff.
inviting me to Little Rock, Margie.
Yeah, so you got to come over to get a little. Yeah, it's pretty good. And you can also, if you want, if there's not something in there you want, you can call ahead, and I can always make you stuff. So I have a lot of people who will say, well, I have this big event on Friday. Can you make me a lasagna? Can you make me a, ziti, something like that? And I'm always happy to help out.
That's so neat. Okay, so how is it that I know you haven't lived in Arkansas your whole life, so how did you end up in Arkansas?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Southern California. And I actually, when both my parents' families moved to the southeastern part of Los Angeles. And then I grew up in that area, but eventually I became educated and got a job in Silicon Valley. So I worked for 23 years for Adobe Systems as the VP of marketing at Adobe. And then not, basically what was the big change thing for me was 9/11, and it was a big trigger for me to change my life. I'd been with the company for a long time, very successful, but I had during that crisis, I had a ticket that I was supposed to be on the plane that took themselves down. And at the last minute, I decided to not go because I had somebody who worked for me that was a director, and he was going to be going to a trade show in the first tower. And so I decided last minute to cancel my flight and send my engineer anyways instead of me. And so as you can imagine, I lost I lost the director that worked for me because he died in the first tower, and then the engineer that I sent in my place actually ended up dying, and so that was what made me realize that okay, now I need to probably decide what I want to do with my life. It's, one of those crises in your life where you kind of reevaluate. And so at a couple years after that, by 2004 or so, I decided that I wanted to leave California. I wanted to leave high tech. And, I ended up finding my way to Arkansas. I didn't have family here, but somebody told me, I think it's the kind of place you probably are looking for. And so I stumbled into the Ozarks, fell in love with it, and bought a place. And I've been here in Arkansas since 2006.
Yeah. And you're no longer in the Ozarks, so you're in Little Rock in the central part of the state. And
Yes.
we'll talk a little bit more about that. So at some point you did it you went and you learned in Europe about farming and things like that. Can you share a little bit about your background and how you came to run this successful farmstead?
Yeah. So, when I did make it to the Ozarks in '06, I'll say my mind was still in a little bit of a blur. That's a whole, that's a life changing situation I went through. So, spent a decade kind of trying, or less than a decade trying to go, okay, what do I want to be? I mean, I had a resort on Lake Norfolk, so I was doing active activities. I was doing cooking classes. I was doing some things like that. But I realized that, I wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted to kind of actually be when I grew up, now that I'm not in high tech. So I decided to kind of put everything in storage and go and take a one-way ticket to Italy. I joined a program called Farm Away. It's now called Work Away, but it used to be called Farm Away. And you sign up to go and live on farms, and you commit to a certain period of time, minimum of 2 weeks, and then you say, I want to be a farmer, or I want to be a chef. Or you could do a combination. And that's what I did. I went there. I lived I was there about 16 months total, living on farms in Italy as well as southern Spain. And during that period of time, I did some farming. I wanted to learn about, permaculture and kind of the more natural way to farm. But I also specialized in preservation of food. And so that's what I did during that period of time. It was great for me. It's again sort of brought me back to remembering how I was raised as a child, because we did that naturally, because I have, both parents are from Italy. But I forgot that's, I didn't forgot that was our natural way to living. And so I came back. When I came back to America, I decided that's when I did not go back to the Ozarks. I said, Little Rock is a better food scene for me, and I think I want to develop more what I grew up, which is an urban farm. I grew up in literally southeast Los Angeles in a very, very urban environment, and where my grandparents ripped out the front yard and the backyard of their urban house, and we lived off that land. So I was like, yeah, I want to do that. So now I'm in Little Rock, literally doing that. It's if you come to visit me, you'll say, oh, she's definitely, she's an urbanite for sure. So that's
Yeah.
how I ended up in Little Rock, and then when I came back here, I wanted to develop something similar. So you'll see my kitchen is very farmhouse. I set it up with the European model of the different stations. So I have a cheese station and a meat station and a bakery station. It's really kind of cool. And then I knew for sure when I came back that I wanted to share my experience by teaching. So I set up a nice little cooking, like a little area where you can come and take cooking classes and canning classes. So yeah, I modeled it pretty much by, on the type of experience that I had while I was traveling there and working on the farms.
Yeah, that's awesome. I I wonder, are there any ways that your current neighborhood, your current situation in Little Rock connect you back to your childhood and the experiences you had with your grandparents in a much larger city, but are there any similarities?
Oh, definitely. So I live off of Arch Street right before Landmark, in a very, underserved area, very, very, I mean, completely food desert. If you go to the right, it's 11.1 miles to a grocery store. And if you go to the left, it's probably even more than that, probably around 15 or 16 miles to a typical grocery store. So I live in an area very similar. I mean, almost the same kind of, well, very similar makeup. In Southeast Los Angeles, where we grew up, it was predominantly Black, but then the other 35% of population in where I grew up were immigrants. So we were just a mix of different people, but none of us knew we were poor because we were so fortunate to have this community that really embraced, we embraced ourselves. We had the lowest common denominator was being poor. So, but there was always food around. Like you could go over to anybody's house. It didn't matter. Everybody was your aunt and uncle, no matter what nationality they were, where they were from. You just said, I'm hungry. And you sat down at a table and you ate. And it's kind of like that here, is that it's this is a very mixed environment of people here, and very mostly poor. But people are so, they embrace their community. They really do. I mean, I do a garden-based learning program with the local after-school program, as well as the local community elementary school. And those kids, not only are they they're just so eager to have a community to be a part of, and they're so eager to learn things from each other. So I do garden-based learning classes with them, and it's really great. And I'm able to incorporate culturally relevant recipes, which is really cool too. So yeah, it's pretty much where I mean, it's almost almost identical to the way I grew up as a kid. And I turned out okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think that's so interesting that you are able to see those connections and um in two places that don't seem like they would be very connected, and build community. So I know you mentioned some food preservation and things like that. How have you um sort of combined your Italian heritage with maybe some Southern recipes or ways of doing things?
Yeah. So one thing I always say is food is culture and culture is food. I mean that you can't separate those things. So, even in this environment, you're always, the culture is people come to the table, and it's like it's the normalizer. You can, when you have food in front of you, people aren't trying to find the differences. They're just celebrating the food. And my grandpa used to always say, food is a celebration of life. And, I grew up thinking that to be true. And so I've lived that way my whole life. And so, when I started cooking here in my kitchen at Urbana, certainly I wanted to embrace my own culture and do Mediterranean style cooking, Mediterranean style recipes. And even in the area of preservation, I would be like trying to make, okay, I'm going to make these pickles, but I'm going to put, Mediterranean spices in there, and they're going to be Mediterranean style spices. And pretty much everyone has been, the communities love that idea, except for once in a while I've had a couple little stumbling blocks. My favorite absolute story is Miss Ruby. So I year two of having this market and doing preservation and having, and trying to impress all my customers and my neighbors here, I decided I was going to do this chow chow. I'm making a chow chow because definitely I know that everyone's always asking me for a chow chow or a chutney. Some people call it chutney, some people call it chow chow. And so I decided I'm going to find a recipe, I'm going to make this, and everyone's going to be so happy. And so I did. I put out maybe a three cases or so, 36 jars of my, pints of my, Southern style, what I thought out of a book, I thought, but of course I says out of a book, but I also probably threw in a few Italian herbs or something in it. And so I made it. A few people came and bought it. But the next thing I know, Miss Ruby showed up. And she's somewhere over 70, she's probably about 4'5", maybe 5 foot at the most, she's very short. But she's tough as nails, little sweet black lady comes in, she's like, "Are you the chef?" I go, yes, ma'am, I am. And she said, "Well, I've got to talk to you. This is not chow chow. This is terrible. This is the worst chow chow I've ever had." I'm like, "Okay, uh, I tried. This is the recipe book I used." And she's like, "No, my husband's going to bring you a recipe, and this is the only recipe you should use." "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." So I did. I didn't even, I was so horrified. I took all the rest of the remaining jars in the kitchen. I'm like, I'll just use these during some kind of event I use. And I used her recipe. And today, even up to the day, you can come over and you can have Miss Ruby's chow chow recipe, because she taught me how to do it the right Southern way. And she taught me there's a hot one and a mild one, and you use them for different things. You have to, certain times you use the hot one and sometimes you use the mild one. So, it's fun because that's, food is culture, culture's food, and you have to embrace those things. And I've been open from the beginning. I mean, even in my canning classes, people will come in and they'll say, "Chef, have you ever canned, made a corn relish?" And I'll be like, "No, I've never done that. I've done relishes, and I've done, I put corn up." So they'll say, "Well, this is my aunt's recipe." And so I've learned so much from just being open to listening to people's lives, because that's their lives. It's a recipe, but a recipe is the story of their life. And so, I have lots of neat things like that happen during canning classes and cooking classes, because if you're just willing to kind of, embrace the different cultures, it's like a mishmash of all of our cultures together.
Yeah, that's oh, I love that. I would love to meet Miss Ruby. I think she sounds like a fun character to be around.
She is a character.
So what are well, yeah, could you talk a little about your experiences with Italian heritage in Arkansas? Where are you finding other members of the Italian community?
Yeah, so surprisingly, Arkansas is a good landing point for Italians, because several of the Italians from the northern part of Italy, Piedmonte, Arusa, that area came to Arkansas by way to actually be in the northern part of northwest part of Arkansas, because they were into farming and they did like dairy cows. So there's a lot of people up in the northwestern part that live up there. And then the rest of the Italians came in through New Orleans. Initially, they might have come from southern Italy and then ended up in New Orleans, but eventually they decided that they, needed or wanted other opportunities. So there's a lot of them that came to Arkansas that either live in Roland or Centerville, or in this Lake Village was another big, the southern part of Arkansas recruited. There was a plantation owner that recruited a lot of Italians to come and work on his plantation. And they've either stayed there in Lake Village or in the Delta, or they've gone ahead and moved to the Roland area here in central Arkansas. So we have a foundation. There's actually an Italian American foundation that is actually in Lake Village, which I'm a part of. And there was a research project that started about 4 years ago. We've been able to geologically or geology track about 10,000 Italians that have actually come through, maybe not stayed, but come through Arkansas from Italy. So it's a big population. We also have 3 different populations of Italian clubs. So we have one in Lake Village, one here in central Arkansas, and then one up in northwest Arkansas and in Tontitown. And we have, regular dinners. Like I host an Italian dinner once a month. And we have about 40 or 45 people that come, and they, how we have like a theme around festivals and things like that. So it's a pretty big population. I have found that it's kind of neat to get together. And then once a year, we try to do some kind of a more like an Italian festival where we all come together and have a meal. We do some kind of a weekend thing together. So it's pretty good population. One last thing is, I'm also on the Little Rock Sister Cities Commission, and we just last week actually had a delegation of 5 people from Sicily that came in, and we signed an agreement with Enna, Sicily, and Little Rock, Arkansas. So now we have a sister city relationship in Sicily. So you're going to be seeing a lot more activity between Little Rock and Sicily now, which I'm super excited about and proud of.
Yes.
So. Yeah.
That's so awesome. So while you've been talking, a question has come to my mind, because you've talked about some of the different regions of Italy and different recipes coming from different regions. Is there any way you could give like a little overview of what some of the major differences are?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and especially around folk. We're talking about customs and traditions and folklore. So the thing is when you think about Italy, it probably, maybe if you haven't traveled there, it feels homogenous, but it's not. Let's take pizza for an example, since we can talk about food so easily. Um, there's not one kind of pizza, so it depends on regionally where you are. And so, you might have the Napolitano pizza, which is, much more flat, or you'll have the Roman one that kind of feels like it might be more like a focaccia. And so, everything is very much considered to be regional. And, you say, well, why is that? Well, it goes back to the practice of farming. It goes back to the traditions of kind of the Italian culture. So basically Italy is very committed to what they call 0 kilometer, meaning buy local. Eat local, buy local, be local. So what they do is they say, okay, what do we grow in our little local and regional food system? And then that's how they prepare their food. So if you go to the mountain, for instance, Sicily, if you go to the mountainous part of Sicily, your family recipes are probably not going to have any fish in it. Or if they are, they're going to be anchovies, or they might be, something out of a can like tuna. But there's not going to be, because they're using local foods. If you go to the coast, then you're going to have very, very fresh fish. And so this is why it turns out to be like that. And even bread. So bread is another example. In the northern part of Italy, at one point there was a shortage of salt. They had to actually pay extra money to get salt. So the Italians in Italy decided, we're just not going to put salt in our bread. We're going to use very little salt in our bread. So if you go there now and you have Tuscana, if you Tuscany breads, or if you go to anywhere north of Rome, the bread is going to have very little salt in it, because that was what happened as a result of this tax problem many, 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 many years ago. And then the tradition of keeping it that way, even though there's not a salt shortage now, they kept the tradition. But if you go south, and then where there wasn't a problem with salt, you'll have a saltier, you'll be able to distinguish that there's a little bit more of a saltier taste to our bread. So and there's always that, fighting back and forth, or not in a fun way. Oh, I don't eat your bread because you have no salt in it. Well, I don't like yours, it's too salty. I make better pizza than you. I make better sauce, So of course there's a little bit of that rivalry as well. But in the end, it comes back down to customs, traditions. That recipe follows the family, generation by generation by generation. Very, very important piece of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That I kind of put you on the spot there, so
That's
I
okay.
I
No problem.
appreciate that. So what are I think it ties in really well. What are some of the traditions that you grew up with as a child that you're now carrying forward as an adult with regards to the kitchen and gardening, of course? Uh,
Yeah. Well, Italian eating's like an art anyways. It's one of those things. The habits of eating are slow. The eating patterns are like slow. It's an event. It's like an experience, and it's intended to be like that. They're not trying to, we're not. It's not go into a restaurant or sit down at the table and immediately have food. Or even eat slow, eat fast, and then get out of there. It's, when we have our traditional dinners here, which I grew up like this as well, and I continue to carry it on in my own family, as well as when we do our dinners here. You start out and you relax, and you might have the local, some kind of appetizer at the very beginning. And it doesn't have to be, it's not like a charcuterie board. Like we think, oh, Italians just, they're constantly eating big old charcuterie boards. It's not really like that. If you, when I grew up, and it's still the same way, if you go visit now with me and anywhere in Sicily or in Italy, you're basically whatever the local family made. So maybe they just made sausage, or maybe it's fresh cheese. So, you sit down, you have some, freshly cured cheese and some freshly cured olives. And that's your appetizer basically. And of course, an aperitivo or a glass of wine. And that's kind of like the moment to just like sit there and just relax and enjoy and start getting conversations around dinner, And then, that also then the next course would be like a pasta. It's usually a pasta would be the next course. And it's not big, like we think of pasta, well, it fills the plate. It's not like that. If you think of a dessert plate, how small that is, traditionally, that's what a pasta would be in that, because it's really like the second course, and it rarely ever has meat in it, right? So and again, if you go back to why is that the case? It's because where, Italy mostly is poor, especially in the southern part of Italy, and especially where I grew up. And so you wouldn't have meat with everything. Meat might be the condiment of the sauce on that. They might have taken some bones, boiled them up, made some kind of a tomato sauce with a flavor of pork in it, but the sauce would be light, the pasta size would be small, and then you would eat that next, because you're going to have that before you have your main dish, which might have some meat in it or some fish in it. I also love this story, talking about traditions about pasta. You eat your pasta hot. And I grew up like that, forgot because I live, sort of became American mentality. And then when I was living on that farm, in those farms, it didn't take me more than a couple of weeks to be living on farms with families again to remember, because I remember, I have another Miss Ruby story, but her name wasn't Miss Ruby. It was, it was Nona. And she served me pasta, the traditional primo pasta. And I was talking to everybody and I was trying to practice my Italian for the first time in a long time. And I'm taking a bite or two of the pasta. And then next thing I know, she's taken my plate away and put another plate of pasta on in front of me. And I'm like, that's weird. I never finished the last one. And I don't want another plate of pasta, but I'm sort of eating this and then going on. And then I was sitting there talking to her grandson, and he goes, you better eat that pasta before she comes and give you a third one. I'm like, why does she's not doing that with anybody else. Why is she taking away my plate and giving me another one? He said, because you have to eat your pasta hot and you're not eating your pasta, you're talking. So I was like, okay, I remember that now. So second course would be pasta and you have to eat it hot. And then the third course, of course, would be a something with some kind of meat in it. It might not be, it's not a full piece of steak or something, but it might be, neck bones or something like that, or it might be fish. Then the fourth course, of course, that would also have vegetables with it. And of course, the final course would be some kind of dolce. And it's not necessarily always a tiramisu or gelato like we think, but it could be, fresh fruit. It could be fresh cheese with fruit, something like that. So, that kind of describes, and it's not just that I'm just describing the courses. I'm describing that we are methodically, slowly enjoying the experience of eating. And while we're eating, we're probably talking about the next meal that we're going to do and what we're going to eat for the next meal. Because that is, food is culture, culture is food. We're talking about it, and we find joy in, cooking, in eating, and enjoying food together. So that's just, that's reality. That's real life. And if you come to any of my family functions or one of my meals here, you'll experience all that.
Is what's the process like in the kitchen? In it, like let's say it's not a more formal meal at where somebody's, where you've planned it out and you're catering, but a dinner club or a family meal. What's like the process in the kitchen? You're describing four courses, so I'm like, are we in the kitchen? Is everybody talking while they're cooking? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, with my cooking classes, you'll come and we will have, let's say the pasta making class that I teach. You're gonna come in, we're gonna learn how to make pasta. Everyone's gonna be working together to make the pasta, their own pasta, and then the group pasta. Then we'll learn a sauce and we'll all be learning how to do the sauce. And then I will have already made a focaccia before you arrive for the cooking class, and a salad. And then after we do all of that, then we'll sit down at the table together and we'll eat pasta, we'll eat the pasta, we'll eat the focaccia, so we eat as a meal, and then we talk about what we did and how we did it, and would you do that again, and what would you change, and and so next thing I know, it's an hour later, because everyone's enjoying that. Plus they get a chance to meet each other, even though they've been working together now for an hour and a half one-on-one together, but still it's not the same when that food enters the picture. Then it's more about stories and families and memories. And so I think that happens. I always say that you never eat anything alone. You never make you never make a recipe alone, because it always brings you back to a memory of something. Maybe you're making, in a southern dish of banana pudding, and you don't just make it in that kitchen when you're making that banana pudding. You probably have, in your memory bank, you're going, oh, I remember when I was with my aunt and my mom, and I can remember this funny story that happened, and this is the story that I can, and you tell that story. And that's what happens with food and recipes, and that happens at the table is you get there and you're like, oh, and I remember this story about when I was making these cookies, and I remember this story, and I remember my dad saying that he didn't like that, and then my mom was like, what do you mean? You're, okay, well, I'm never gonna make, so all these great little conversations that would go on during that. So yes, in the kitchen, you're cooking, but you're also sharing the memories and the stories, and laughing, and there's it's a fun experience. It's not,
Right.
no matter what, on a
Yeah.
regular basis.
A lot of fellowship in the preparing, not just the eating. And I
Mhm.
think that's amazing. That sounds
Mhm.
great.
And I will share that when a lot of times I'll have a mixed, men and women in the class, and I'm always careful to remind the guys that are in that class, the sexiest thing there is a man who will do dishes. And so I'm always reminding them that. And of course, the women always agree with me and they laugh.
Right. Any chore is good, right?
That's right. That's right.
Uh, so um I let's I want to know now, sort of, I want kind of breaking away from tradition a little, but not really. My next question is why is urban farming important? Like why is that, what's that, at least to you? Why is that important to you to carry forward?
I think it's important. I think post the pandemic, I want to answer it in two different ways, and to say that post pandemic, I want to say that we should all be responsible for knowing the source of our food. We've learned that, and also for food insecurity. So we should know who's creating our food, like how do we get food if there's a shortage of some sort. So I would like to always challenge people to take personal responsibility for that, because I think we all have to play a role in that piece of it. The food, the local food, well, I shouldn't even say that. The global food system is really challenged right now, because we're losing so many farmers, and we are having a hard time getting young people to take on that role as a farmer. So we could find ourselves in a situation at some point, globally, where we don't have mass produced food. So that's where I always try to say, be be mindful of the fact that we all need to do our part in growing our own food. For me, I think that it's important, because I think I'm in a situation based on my past life as a child, my experience as in the training in the my training program, but also fortunately for me, I go back and forth to Sicily all the time, and I get to bring people to farms. So I have a very great foundation on how you can do it, and do it in a way that's not commercial. You don't have to, and I always tell people, you don't you don't have to have 12 acres of rolling hills. The people in my community, that a lot of the women that come in and the men that come in to my classes are single, they're poor. And I say, it's okay. Just let's get some buckets of dirt, some really, and the most important thing is great soil. And I can show you how if you vertically grow your food, in one bucket you can grow four things, right? And so you just have to get the tomato to go up. Or I tell them about Three Sisters. I try to teach them about vertical farming, because that is so important for them, so they can learn how to grow things. And I think being an urban farmer and being a model for them is really an important role that I play every single day. And then the final piece of it is, because I don't think we can talk about that subject without mentioning why it's important. Because in these communities that are poor, they're the ones who are predominantly diabetics. They have autoimmune diseases. They're sick, and so I try my hardest to impart about the healthy part of that. I think we have to, I've had people say, wow, that's how a cucumber grows. I'm like, yeah, that's what a cucumber looks like, or somebody will say, well, I don't really eat tomatoes too much, especially kids. They'll say, I don't eat tomatoes. I'm like, really? Do you ever eat ketchup? They're like, yeah. Well, ketchup is made from tomatoes. So connecting them to what the food source is and making them understand that, and understanding why, yes, you love that ketchup on your French fries, but try this tomato with just a little bit of olive oil and see what you think about that. Because, transforming the taste buds so they can have a healthier alternative is an important part of my life every day here on this farm.
Wow. Um, so I want to take a second. We're getting close to winding down. I do want to give you a second to share about your book, Mangiamo, right?
Mangiamo, yes.
Um, so what would people, if someone was going to buy this book, what type of recipes, what are they going to find in it?
You will feel the journey of my life, because it's my mom's family that's from Naples, my dad's family that's from Sicily. So it's recipes from both of those family traditional cuisine, but also it's some of the recipes that I learned when I was living with those farmers and those families during that 18 months, so that so you're actually getting a very traditional cultural experience, like a cultural journey that you'll get from that. So they're not going to be your normal, not necessarily your normal kind of lasagna and things like that. They'll be more culturally relevant to my family.
Yeah, that sounds great. So my last question is just sort of what do you see in the future at Urbana Farmstead?
I continue to build the garden-based learning program for both youth and adults. Initially, I started it just for youth, and doing it through this after-school program. But I'm starting to. But I last year I realized that there's important for me to also teach the adults. So so I have much more of a emphasis on garden-based learning. What that means is that I'm teaching two facets of that. One is to be able to teach people how to plant, how to harvest, how to cook, and how to preserve food. So that's the program. But the second leg to that is I'm trying to teach a little bit more of the plant-based. So if I now last year, 2 years in a row, I've been offering like a 6-week plant-based program for people that want to take away some of the meat in their diet, Mediterranean style. It's not vegan, it's not vegetarian, but it's using meat as sort of more of a condiment. And so I'm really liking that. It's been I got a little nervous at the beginning. The first time I was going to offer it, I was like, oh, I hope this is going to work out, but it's been very, very good. I've been taking part of that 6-week program is I take you to the local Mediterranean and local Chinese and local Mexican stores, and I kind of help you figure out how to order from the meat counter, and we pick different things. And so, yeah, it's been very well received, and people are liking it a lot. So now I'm going to be offering, starting in August, my third round of that plant-based diet or plant-based program, and it's going well.
Wow, that sounds great. That's awesome. So, well, thank you so much for being here for the Arkansas Folklife web series. I really appreciate your time and energy. I feel like I've learned so much. Even though we've already had a conversation, I learned a lot more today. It's been great. I want to open it up and see if anybody has any questions. You're welcome to unmute, or if you want to type something into the chat, I can read it out loud. But just take a second.
So tell me, Chef, have you noticed that after you got here and you brought this beautiful way of thinking about food, that more of it came to the Central Arkansas and it became a bigger scene?
I actually have. Today I noticed that one of my colleagues in farming at St. Joseph's has just started a series this month called Manja, which is like, manja meaning go ahead and eat, but just one person. And it's the kind of the farm to table thing. So I'm excited about that. I feel like it's a compliment to say, yeah, this is something to be thinking about. So yeah, I do believe that. And one last thing on that, which I'll share with you because you'll be interested, I'm sure. Also, Cheryl, is while I mentioned earlier the relationship between Little Rock and Sicily, I'm very proud to say that I also helped broker an MOU was signed between the University of Arkansas Ag Division and our Sicilian university called Core. So starting next year, we'll have exchange program for students, chefs, faculty, as well as research projects between Sicily and Little Rock. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that happening as well.
Yeah, that's so great.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, thanks for speaking. Margie, is that right? Did I say that
Yes.
right? Okay. I'm Karaya. I'm the newly appointed agriculture librarian at the University of Arkansas. So this is all great to hear about. I'm learning about so many different connection points. Can you talk a little bit more about what you just mentioned? Or can you tell me what the name was again?
Yes. So in Sicily, there's a university called Core University, and it is it's as you can imagine, and there's several programs that are all ag focused as well as Mediterranean lifestyle kind of focus. So I've been working for about 2 years on pulling together the right connections in at University of Arkansas Ag Division as well as through Core. So last week we had a delegation from Sicily that was here, and they met. We had a signing with President Bobbitt and Dr. DQ Fields, and they signed an agreement with the vice mayor of Enna, Sicily, and a representative also from Core University. So we now have a memorandum of understanding between the two universities. We're going to start out with this year developing some protocols around research development, specifically around ancient grains. And then by next year, we're going to develop a program of exchange faculty and students, and so around the culinary scene. So that's what the agreement is, and it's new. I believe that we're working on a schedule for Dr. Bobbitt and Dr. Fields and Dr. Rainey to go to Sicily with me in October and actually go to the university and meet with them. So stay tuned. There's more to come.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. I'm also just gonna put my email in the chat just so that we can keep connected if anything comes up. So nice to meet you.
Okay. I will cry. I don't think we've met yet, but I'll try to make sure to get an email between the two of you guys going. Is there any other questions?
All right, chef, I'm going to give you the last one and the best one that I always ask every chef I ever meet. Did you want to be a chef when you grew up?
I did not think one time I was going to be a chef, but I was a chef in my kitchen. Like I grew up thinking everybody in Italian family is a chef, and we were always like the competitive, I make this better than you, I make this better than you. But to think about it as a profession, I never thought that I would be a chef. Interesting enough. But now once I left my corporate job and I was searching around in my head, like, when am I the happiest? Like, I wanted to get out of corporate, and I was like, what points in my life were I with the absolute happiness? And it was like in the kitchen. So maybe my little girl inside of me probably knew I was supposed to be a chef. Since, as I discovered now that food is definitely my love language. So maybe I just didn't recognize, sometimes the distance between your heart and your head, it's like many, many miles. So I suspect that probably the heart knew that I was supposed to be a chef, and the head just, I'm stubborn, Sicilian, stubborn. But thanks for asking me that.
Yeah, that was a great question. Okay, well, thank you guys all so much for joining us. A recording of this will go up on YouTube by Monday at the latest. I really appreciate you again, Chef Margie, for being with us and sharing your knowledge. And I appreciate everyone here for sharing their time with us today. I hope you're all well, and see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Good day for everybody.
Bye-bye.